Okay, let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. I want to talk about things that we should consider when creating and when reviewing pull requests. Some of the things you probably know, if not all, but as with my previous presentations, I'm trying to make to do reminders of things that we should consider. First of all, why do we do pull requests? My guess is that everyone knows, all of us that are developers know what a pull request is. And first of all, it's not unnecessary overhead. You might say, it's easier if I just merge my changes into, if I push to my changes to develop directly, or if I push my changes to master. However, pull requests improve code quality. Why is that? Because you have another set of eyes looking at your code, or you are looking at someone else's code, and you are able to identify mishaps in the code of the other person. And by doing that, you can decrease the number of defects in your project. That way, and you know, the less defects that reach our customer, the better. Now, your commit messages are important. This is, I consider this a very important part of the develop process. First of all, these are some standards that I want to cover. Commit message, it should be capitalized in the first line. It should not end with a period. And I'll give you some examples in a couple of seconds. It should not end with a period. It should use the imperative mood. Instead of saying removing, for example, instead of saying removing deprecated methods, it should say remove deprecated methods. Instead of saying fixes, or instead of saying fixing something, it should say fix something. Now, fix something is not the best commit message, but we'll look into that as well soon. And a properly for the last bullet point here says that a properly formatted git commit subject line should always be able to complete the following sentence. If applied, this commit will, and then your message. For example, if your message says the same thing that the example says here, remove deprecated methods in the third bullet, the sentence below would be, if applied, this commit will remove deprecated methods. So that's a good commit message because the sentence makes sense. This commit will remove deprecated methods. It's grammatically, from a grammar point of view, it's correct. However, let's say that your commit message is fixes, right? You call it fixes. Let's check what the last sentence would say. If applied, this commit will fixes. That doesn't make sense. Therefore, the commit message should be improved. If your commit message says fixing unit tests, let's see what the last sentence would be. If applied, this commit will fixing unit tests. That doesn't make sense, right? The grammar is not correct. That's why some of the standards for commit messages say that we should use the imperative mood in our commits. And feel free to interrupt if there are any questions at some point. Again, your commit messages are important. Messages such as fixing bugs or addressing PR feedback or fixes or PR fixes are not going to be useful later because you'll forget what you were trying to do. And I can tell you by experience that this is 100% true. At some point in my career, I remember there was a bug in the application, in some calculations, and I had to figure out what the problem was. I identified the commit. It was mine. It was an old commit, maybe a year from a year ago. And I couldn't figure out why I made that change. My commit was very generic. It was something like addressing PR feedback, actually that one. And I wish I had written something more meaningful. And because I didn't, I had to kind of guess and fix the bug that I had identified, hoping that it would not break something else, because basically I had to roll back some of my changes in a commit. I kind of assumed that my commit was wrong. There was a bug in my old commit. So anyway, that made me realize that by experience, unfortunately, that messages are important. And a good commit, the last sentence in this slide, says that a good commit message will indicate what the code is doing and possibly the why. Not just the what, also the why. The why is very important, not only in commit messages, actually. It's also important in requirements, why you are implementing a requirement. And let me make a pause here. If someone joins the meeting, could you approve or allow them to join, please? Because someone just joined and I had not seen him.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, so thanks, Itzel. Again, the why is very important, not only in commit messages, but also in requirements and for us as software developers. Finally, in each commit, the code should successfully compile. This may be something you could argue against, but personally, let's say that you want to find an issue and you go back in the code and try to figure out when you started seeing that issue, that defect, and for that you need to run the code. Think about what will happen if you switch to a commit that doesn't compile. That would be kind of a headache for you, because let's say that in that commit that didn't compile is where the error was introduced. That's double work for you. You need to make sure the code compiles first and then fix the defect that you found, or try to identify where the defect that you found is coming from. So to me, this is a rule of thumb. In each commit, the code should successfully compile. And instead of should, for me, it must successfully compile. And if not, you have alternatives, right? You can do a rebase and merge the faulty commit with the one that fixed the compilation error. Let's continue. Let's talk about some tips when creating a PR. We're gonna stop talking about commit messages and commit, and let's switch now to some things that we should consider when creating a pull request, which is the same as a PR. First of all, it should have a meaningful title, and if necessary, a description. And not only a description, a meaningful description. For example, the description could be this pull request adds form validation to the login screen, right? Something like that. And then after that, we are using a custom framework. Using a custom framework was considered, but instead it uses out-of-the-box validation because something else, right? You are explaining why you did things, or why you are creating this PR in a certain way, and why you discarded some other alternatives. Now, it's also very important to not submit code that is commented out. That code should be removed. And if that code is important, if it's something that is going to generate a task later, it should become a task in Jira or whatever task management system you use. This is, for example, one of the pull requests in a project. As you can see, it uses the ticket number. I think that's also important for traceability of the pull request. It includes the ticket number, which in this case is 21, along with the title, which is the name of the title of the ticket. This is the title of the ticket and the title number. When you create a pull request, you also need to be mindful of some things, and let's talk about that. By mindful, I mean you should be considered. You should kind of think ahead. For example, let's say that you're creating a pull request which implements a login screen, right? Something for authorization. In that case, if in your PR, in your pull request, you're including changes like switching from tabs to white spaces in another file, which is related to a payment processor system, for example, or if you are reordering class methods, moving private methods to the end of the file and putting the public methods at the top in another module of your application, or if you are renaming files that are not related to what you're doing, or in general, any refactoring, that's going to make the reviewer's job more difficult. Why is that? Because the reviewer is not only going to review your changes, the changes related to the ticket that you're working on, the reviewer also needs to review changes related to refactoring. So in those cases, it's better to separate the pull request and actually create two. And things get a little worse if you are actually working in the same branch as other person, as somebody else. For example, in my current project, Alan, which is my teammate, and I are working in the same branch, which is not developed because we're putting together some functionality and we want it to be complete before actually creating the PR to develop. So we're working in the same branch. And if I start making changes, or, oh yeah, I was talking about the worst case scenario. If I am rebasing changes in that shared branch, I'm going to create kind of a nightmare for him because he's going to get a lot of conflicts potentially. So when you are working, the message here is that if you are working in a shared branch, you should avoid making a rebase. And as a rule of thumb, the last bullet here is that you should only rebase commits that you have not pushed. Rebases should be on your local changes, on your local commits. Once you push them, ideally you should not be rebasing them because more people could be working on that branch that you just rebased, and that creates conflicts, unnecessary conflicts for your teammates. Again, if you have any questions or different ideas, let me know. And this is a set of commits. Yeah, I was talking about using a shared branch. This is a set of commits that we have in that shared branch. As you can see, we use the ticket number and the title of the task. Sometimes we merge code from develop into this shared branch. And in the end, we're probably going to do a rebase of this and just leave one commit with what we're doing. And I'm not saying that you should create one commit for everything that you do, but in this case, that's something we will probably do. Now, let's stop talking about creating a pull request, and let's talk about the next step in the process, which is reviewing a pull request. And this is for reviewers. One of the things that I recommend is pulling the code into your own machine and running it, executing the automated test, and finally try to break the functionality that was implemented. And it's also important as a reviewer to ask other team members to review each other's PR, to involve them and engage them in the process of reviewing pull requests. Why is that important? That's important because it gives other developers ownership of the code. And that happens to me. Like if I'm looking at somebody else's code, I kind of feel like it's also my code because I'm adding comments to it. I'm adding feedback. And also because I am involved in not writing the code, but reviewing the code. It also improves the team's knowledge because somebody may be asked to review a module that they didn't build. And that allows them to understand or at least know a little bit about what's going on in other parts of the code. Finally, it also asking other team members to review pull requests allows developers to increase their code reviewing skills. Yeah, reviewing code is a skill. You need attention to detail. For example, that's one of the things that a reviewer will need. And even if a tech lead asks other people to review pull requests, the tech lead is still accountable for the quality of the code. Now, let's keep in mind that when reviewing a pull request, that any coding mistake that we find is not a reflection of the author of the pull request. For example, a developer could be tired, could be distracted. There could be something else going on. He or she may be assigned to multiple projects, and he or she missed something while writing the code. So it's important to leave our ego at the door. This means that a code review is about the code. We are not reviewing people. We are not reviewing our teammates. We are reviewing the code that we wrote, and we should keep in mind that mistakes can happen to anyone. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. And sorry, I want to touch on something else here, that increasing other developers' skills when it comes to reviewing pull requests is good for everyone, because if one of the members of a team grows, the tech lead can also grow. It's kind of like we pull each other to the top. Now let's talk about let's continue talking about reviewing pull requests, and specifically, let's talk about. Sorry, just give me a second here. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, I think we're good. Sorry. Let's talk about giving feedback to other teammates. We should justify the reason for asking for changes. We should not only ask someone, rename this variable. We should tell them why we want them to rename a variable. For example, please rename this variable to give it a more meaningful name, something with more clarity, or rename this variable because there's a typo, right? We could have mistyped something. Again, it's important to justify the reason for asking changes. Now, not all the feedback that we give is going to require changes. This is very important to keep in mind. I follow this standard of whenever I add a comment to a pull request, or at least I try to follow it, right? Whenever I add a comment to a pull request, I indicate if it's a must, a should, or a could. Must obviously means that it needs to get fixed, it needs to be changed. For example, must fix the unit test that is broken, right? This sounds like this is actually something that should be fixed, a broken unit test. Should, when do I use should? For example, it's something that we can live with for now, but in other circumstances, I would ask my team to change. For example, should add more test coverage. Now, in this case, it's up to the creator of the pull request to decide if he or she wants to make the change or not, right? That would depend on time, priorities, and any other factors. So again, should is something that we can live with for now, but in other circumstances, I would change it to a must. Now, let's talk about could, the last prefix. When I say could, not when I say could, when someone says could, it's something that we can do in a different way, right? But it's not required. Just to give the developer the option that this could have been done in a different way, like an alternative. But the way that they implemented the code is perfect. It's fine, right? So when I say could, I would say, for example, could refactor this code into a method, right? The code is working fine, but I would have done it. I could have done it in a different way. Let's go to the next slide. When giving feedback, we should also be direct. What do I mean by this? Do not fish around. For example, we should avoid giving feedback such as, did you read the ticket requirements? Because that's not constructive feedback, right? We should instead say something like, the requirements indicate that you should do this, but in your changes, I'm noticing that you did this other thing, right? So we should avoid fishing around. Also, we should be positive in our feedback, because we may be wrong. We may be asking the developer to do something that is not the right way to the right solution. For example, when I give feedback to somebody that wrote CSS code, which is not one of my strengths, I would say, I know you're proficient with cascading styling sheets, CSS, but did you investigate that there's a flex model, which, or did you, something like that, right? Like an alternative that me, not being a CSS expert, would probably have chosen. So I try to be mindful that the other person is probably has better skills than me in some areas. And I don't assume that I have the right feedback. I also ask sometimes, did you consider using something else, right? Whenever I hesitate and I know that my feedback, that there might be a better alternative to my feedback, but I have a question about the pull request, about a specific part of the pull request. And finally, the last bullet, we should try to give all feedback at once. Instead of doing during multiple reviews at different times. I know this is difficult sometimes, but in general, when we check the pull request, we should try to do a full and complete review of the pull request. Of course, there are exceptions, and that's perfectly fine. But the thing that we should avoid is checking the pull request once, giving feedback, waiting for the feedback to be resolved, and then look again at the PR and try to find more issues in different in other parts of the pull request, because we're just forcing the, why is that? Yeah, that's also important, because we're forcing the creator of the pull request to switch branches constantly every time that we give feedback in that PR, and we all know that switching branches is not fun. I think we're almost done. I briefly mentioned this first bullet previously. Any code that is commented out, and this is specific about to-dos, things to be done. To-dos, that's what a to-do is. It says that any to-do in the code should be removed. Why is that? Because it should be converted into a Jira task or a DevOps board task, or a Trello task, something like that. So we should remove all to-dos before merging a pull request. And again, create a Jira ticket for that. And we should also review the commit messages. For example, and this goes back to the commit, to the standard when writing commit, to the standards when writing commit messages. There are good standards when writing commit messages, and that is why reviewing the commit messages is also important. I understand that it's easy to forget because it's in a different tab of the pull request. You need to click somewhere else to find the commit messages, but it's important, and we should try to do that to avoid having future issues such as the one that I mentioned earlier that happened to me. So messages like fixing tests and updated login handler are obvious and useless. And finally, we should make sure that the README file, which is part of Git, is updated when appropriate. Finally, and this is to end the presentation, if something looks great in somebody else's code, we should give positive feedback. Like, I like the way that you refactor this code, or I like the way that you implemented certain module, right? Or I like the way that you're using lambdas or reflection to achieve something. So we should give positive feedback as well. That also helps. We should not only focus on negative feedback. And with that, that would be the last slide. Does anybody have any questions? Do we all create pull requests and try to follow standards? And if not, I'll see how I can share this. I'll share this presentation with everyone in the Slack group, so that you can take a look at the code standards just as a refresher, or in case it will help you in your project.
Rodolfo, just this is Antonio Diaz. Just question: do you have any links or standard where can we review the commit best practices and pull request standards, something like that that you can share with us?
Okay, yeah. Did you said link to Git link to standards for Git commits? I can find those for you. Obviously, I didn't come up with these standards. They are not mine. Those are best practices that I pulled from other websites. So yeah, okay. I'll find the links and send those to you. And I think I know where you're going. That this is not a complete list. There are more standards, yeah. But this is a short list, and I'll send you the link with all the standards, Antonio.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodolfo.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodolfo.